all being here. My name is Defne Ayas, and I'm the director here at WDW. And welcome to the last 100 years, part 1, WDW Review Offline, our symposium that we're staging online, offline, at the same time. And welcome to our participants, guest speakers today. And all the representatives of the Pan-European Institutional Network, which we're presenting the symposium as part of. Our keynote speakers, image readers, as well as our desk editors are in your bio, or their bios are also in your program, so you can use that for your reference. As some of you know, WDW has a 25 years long tradition of publications. And when I arrived here 3 years ago, we started to jumpstart an online platform because it was also the time where austerity programs were kicking in and were also threatening the publishing platforms in the Netherlands. So we took a leap and basically jump-started an online journal, which is a bit unprecedented in the art world in its ambitions, and set up editorial desks in cities like Athens, where we searched for an economist, and he happens to be now the most mediated person in the world. Yannis Varoufakis, who is the finance minister in Greece, was actually our editor until last month, reporting from Athens. We set up a desk in Jerusalem, in Cairo, and eventually in Delhi and Moscow and so forth. So the editorial desks were set up not with a colonial idea in mind, but more like how can they inform the European situation in its repackaging. And that's why we went a little bit out of our way outside the art world to hear different voices. And soon enough we realized most of these cities where the editorial desks are operating are also the former Ottoman soil, as if the 100 years scenarios have not been completed, areas that are still bleeding. And I have this passion, this recurring conspiracy that the European avant-garde is born actually on the former Ottoman soil, with Marinetti, the futurist poet who was born in Alexandria, who actually was a war journalist fighting at the border of Turkey and Greece during the Balkan War, or the first futurist poet, Valentin Saint-Point, who was in Syria, who converted to Islam, way before WikiLeaks started rolling out news about Herzog de Meuron and OMA operating actually in conversations with Bashar Assad in Syria. So there's actually an interesting art history material also sitting in the Ottoman soil. So why, of course, in Rotterdam, everything that has happened in Near and Middle East has repercussions in Europe, from the oil index prices that are being set in the harbor to integration, eternal questions, to the recruitment of armed movements, to security issues in Europe. So many crumbles of colonial dynamics. We can also feel it in Rotterdam, where Asia Minor is actually seated more than in Asia Minor itself. Today we had the pleasure to team up with Beaux-Arts and their Pan-European cross-institutional program, which takes the exhibition The Sultan's World at Beaux-Arts at its heart, which opened 2 days ago. So we have actually partners here from Vienna, from Krakow, from Brussels, also present. And the exhibition Select Images will be the subject to our image readings today. More about the structure you're going to actually hear from Adam Kleinman, our chief editor of WDW Review, who I teamed up at the very early nascent stages of the journal, and we've expanded the desks together. We launched the sediment section, which you can actually see online, which takes 1917 at its heart. We're going to keep commissioning actually writers throughout the year around 1917. And we've also expanded our think pieces to include also editorial cartoons and examples of Dan Parjovski you're actually seeing here, who's a Romanian artist, journalist. who does very precise, timely interventions always vis-a-vis politics in different regions, globally actually. So on that note, I'm going to thank also Natasha Hoare, our in-house curator, for the excellent production and organization of today, and our partners, and I will say hello to Adam again and let him introduce today and our participants.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Daphne. Thanks, everyone, for coming, and I thank our august guests. We have a long day ahead of us, so I'll be brief, and I'll just kind of lead you through, but I'll give you a little heads up so we know what to expect. As Daphne mentioned, we have this program guide. I hope everyone got one. Yeah? And in it, you'll find bios of everyone, so I won't do that kind of introduction, so if you want to figure out more about who's speaking and so on and so forth, it will be in there. Likewise, if you'll notice in the center gatefold, many of the images we will be discussing are in here. And you might be wondering why this looks a little bit like a menu. And if you're thinking that, you might be also wondering, where are the specials and what are the specials today? I'm going to say, for now, that's you guys, all of the audience. You're our specials. And to that end, we're going to reserve announcing them till the end. So we'll do a plenary at the end in which discussions and questions will happen. So if you have any, hold on to them and maybe even doodle in here. But really quick, just so you get the breakdown. As Daphne said, we are an online journal, but today we're offline. So if anyone has any of their cell phones and things like that, please silence them at least. But if you want to do online things, go ahead. And just some grounding. This is called Past 100 Years, Part 1. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek. As Daphne had mentioned, we were forged, let's say, in the beginning of austerity, and the sort of European project, of course, is being questioned quite a bit today. Part of the reason why we've drawn back to 1917 is, of course, you know, there was a very large war around that time period, and the aftermath of that actually created a lot of the geopolitics we're still dealing with today. For example, the reason why we picked the year 1917 is it's the year in which the United States entered World War I and created a thing called the Espionage Acts to control information during that time. And that was ultimately used instead to prosecute radicals as opposed to treasonous people, theoretically. And it's the exact same laws, for example, that Edward Snowden is being prosecuted today. So there's a very long arc that we're trying to show that these issues and these questions, although germane now, have foregrounding that we should look at. But to that end, since I said we have a long day, there's some water on the sides if anyone wants it. But let me just introduce Alev Scott to kick us off.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here. It's very exciting. I didn't know any of the other participants before we had lunch just now, and I'm still bewildered by the sort of scope of all of our presentations. My first slide is early. I'll leave you in suspense while I just introduce my talk. 2023 will be the 100-year anniversary of the founding of the Republic of Turkey. 100 years since the Ottoman Empire collapsed in 1918, and Turks waged a successful war of independence against the French and English troops who were carving up the remaining Ottoman territories between them. When Mustafa Kemal Atatürk succeeded in fighting off the Allies and setting Turkey up as a modern, secular republic, this was undoubtedly a huge achievement, whatever our private feelings might be about the ways he went about that. He went to great lengths to reverse what he saw as a stagnant, backward nature of the Ottoman Empire and engineered what we might call an emergency enlightenment to ensure modern Turkey could deal on equal terms with Europe, transforming the Turkish language overnight by introducing the Latin alphabet, introducing laws to separate state and religion, to enforce education, and to enfranchise women. In 2023, many Turks will celebrate his achievements, but the ruling government is hailing this date in a very different way. For the Justice and Development Party, or AKP, 2023 will mark the birth of a new Turkey, Yeni Türkiye, as in the poster, a concept which is entirely their creation. Turkey is a regional power that does not seek to emulate the West, that celebrates Islam, emboldens and befriends the predominantly Muslim populations of Turkey and beyond, and affords the ultimate respect to those who had absolutely nothing to do with those elections, and yet he was the face of it. So it would be the equivalent of having Barack Obama's face on sort of smaller region. I don't know much about American politics, but if you can imagine how inappropriate that would look. And it's because he is the face of the party, and his popularity and his charisma, which he undoubtedly has, is the sort of magic ingredient that makes the AKP so successful, in my opinion. One of the ingredients. So the next slide shows another example of Sağlam irade means iron will or unshakable will. And this is a very interesting poster because it was put up all of a sudden all over cities in Turkey. And the reason was the corruption scandal that broke in December 2013, so this scandal involved a lot of leaks of tapes apparently showing AKP politicians and Erdogan himself engaging in corruption. So this caused obviously a bit of an upset, but the AKP came out fighting, and this was their response, again, before the municipal elections, which turned into just this personality test for Erdogan. And I just think it's quite striking that all you need, apparently, is a photo of your prime minister looking determined and powerful and alpha male, and those words, iron will. Next slide. This, which I think a colleague is going to be talking about later, was Erdogan's election logo for his campaign for presidency last summer. And there are obvious similarities to Obama's logo, which I don't have, but more interesting for me is, first of all, the sort of image of a rising sun and a new beginning, hope, and also the, for want of a better word, the squiggle at the bottom is apparently very close to the name of the prophet in the Arabic script. So this was seen to be a kind of subliminal Islamic message, which is very much the AKP's style. Oh, by the way, at this point it's worth mentioning that Erdogan's, the marketing campaign who works for Erdogan, for the AKP, is run by a guy called Erol Kolçuk, who was loaned out, as it were, to the Muslim Brotherhood before their campaign. And he actually did the same thing, more or less, for the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. And both times it was successful. Morsi was elected and Erdogan was elected, so it works. Okay, so we have some key themes here. We have Erdogan identified with Turkey itself, symbolizing both continuation of the Ottoman tradition, continuation of 12 years of AKP power, and a new beginning, hence the Yeni Türkiye, which, if you think about it, is quite a clever trick to pull off, considering they have been in power for a number of years. So they're actually an old party, but somehow marketing themselves as this new hope, new power. So what is this new power? What are they talking about? Davutoğlu, as I've mentioned, says it involves putting the mistakes of the past 100 years behind Turks and returning to Turkey's roots. He says he sees the last 100 years as a parenthesis, or a sort of a little blip that needs to be got out the way. And Erdogan, I think, represents more of the sort of the forward-looking idea, and in a way he gives us a kind of back-to-the-future vision, because he repeatedly asks his voting base to celebrate upcoming Ottoman and, in fact Islamic, but Ottoman and Seljuk anniversaries. For example, 2071 will be the 1,000-year anniversary of the Battle of Manzikert, which was in 10,071, which was a victory of Muslim Seljuk Turks over Christian Byzantines. So fairly obscure for him to pick out there, but that's apparently the next big anniversary for Turkey. Victories, leadership In true Ottoman tradition, leadership is extremely important to the AKP government, and Erdogan is the ultimate figurehead. He's seen as a leader who embraces the Middle East as a region and is often photographed showing how comfortable he is in the Middle East, in Middle Eastern Islamic countries in particular. And while he's usually seen in sort of classic politician garb, this is an example of him wearing something very few Turkish leaders would have worn in the past 100 years, I think. I think he's in Qatar here, I can't actually remember that, but what's more important is his general look, and his covered wife next to him, also important. And I do think it's interesting that he's not, he's embracing this look. He's, he's saying, this is, we have an affinity. Turkey is part of the Middle East. We do. He has no problem with appearing like this, which I think would have been a problem for many Turkish predecessors. And the fact that he does have this somewhere in his wardrobe begs the question why he didn't wear it here, where he is at King Abdullah's funeral, the only besuited person in a large room of dish dashes. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about media manipulation and how that's very important, very instrumental in promoting Erdogan and his party and New Turkey in general. On the 20th of January, just in 2015, this year, there was the first ever cabinet meeting chaired by the president. It's previously always been the prime minister, but now that Erdogan is the president, it's been changed and he is chairing it. And this was big news in Turkey, and depending on whether or not you read the pro or opposition papers, it was painted as either a glorious change or a terrible betrayal. And this is the front page of a pro-government paper, Minat. And if you look in the very top image, not the man, but the cabinet meeting photograph, you probably can't see, so there's a close-up here. This is apparently a real photo of the cabinet meeting, but you might notice that Erdogan is several times bigger than everyone else, so he's been photoshopped fairly blatantly there. And it's funny, but that appeared in a national paper without any comment whatsoever on any changes. So this is apparently what's Erdogan is literally enormous in stature. Things like this show that the AKP is good at its media manipulation. They use it to promote themselves. They're good at it. They deserve some credit for that. And they have a combination of good ideas and also a certain ruthlessness when it comes to breaking the rules and availing themselves of all opportunities possible. So in real terms, that amounts to using up more than their fair share of coverage. In the run-up to the presidential elections last August, someone did an investigation into the percentage of television airtime awarded to Erdogan on the state media television, TRT, as opposed to his opposition candidates. So Erdogan had 533 minutes of airtime in just 2 days in July, compared to 3 minutes and 24 seconds for Ekmelettin İhsanoğlu, who is the main opposition candidate, and 45 seconds for Selahattin Demirtas, who is the candidate for the HDP party, which is the leftist Kurdish rights kind of supporting party. That's a fairly large skew. I'm going to show you a presidential election advert for Erdogan, which also appeared in the run-up to the election, and it tells the story of his life and highlights of his political career. For those of you who are familiar with Turkish politics already, I advise you to look out for certain key details, including the Davos session, the 1-minute episode, the IMF, and inflation rate controversy. gets me every time. I really love that video. I actually think I could write a whole thesis on all the various images and the way they're brought brilliantly to life. So a few key episodes of that, you'll notice at one point he was imprisoned. That was because he recited a poem in which he said, which contained the lines, "The minarets are our bayonets, the domes are our barracks." He was sort of, it was a very overtly Islamic poem, but he was put into jail for it. So that's one of the sort of disasters that he fought back from. And the whole tone, I mean, it's a very funny video for us, but I mean, it worked. It must have worked. It's part of their whole campaign, and it's kind of brilliant. Like the music, I don't know if you noticed that music, I think, is a key thing in a lot of the AKP's campaign videos and adverts in general. They just get this rousing music that sort of, you can't really help but kind of get carried away with it, even when it's as patently ludicrous as this. So just a note on the end, the flag. It's actually illegal to use the image of the Turkish flag in campaign material. And the fact that they did so, not just a glimpse, but literally a lingering, lasting image at the end, I think is just symbolic of the fact that they can, and they know it works. And if they got fined for it, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but I'm sure they calculated that it was worth that. They don't mind breaking the rules, and I think they see it as their right, in fact. Having been fairly slow to catch on to social media after the Gezi protests, the AKP really upped their game. I think after Gezi it became apparent that things like Twitter and Facebook were being, I mean, Turkey is a huge user of these social media sites, and they were used to organize protests and sort of encourage people to attend the protests during Gezi. So I think the AKP realized that, and they realized they needed to get involved, even though Erdogan has famously referred to Twitter as Mitte Twitter, and he was going to stamp it out, which he did shortly, for a short time. But yeah, the fact that the AKP did this incredible switch around is shown, I think, most strikingly by the fact that in September 2013, just a few months after the Gezi protests, they admitted, some officials admitted, that they were training a team of 6,000 young social media representatives, is what they were called. I would call them trolls, having come across them several times on Twitter. They're really quite determined. So, you know, training trolls, essentially, battling on both sides, sort of promoting Erdogan as the best thing ever, and also attacking those people, including journalists, who criticize him. That's a big part of what the AKP do on social media. In terms of state media, they use that to construct narratives, to sort of supplement what they say in their rallies and on television. They have a narrative in particular that's talked by, explained by columnists in their papers like Yeni Şafak, Akşam, Güneş, these kind of papers. And this narrative is that outside powers, so especially Western powers like America and Britain, are jealous of Turkey's success, and they don't like the fact that Turkey has a successful economy and so on, and they want to bring Turkey down. And the villains of this sort of dark force are often picked out as being people like the interest rate lobby and the people, the stock exchange lobby, and the people who organised Gezi, and there were Jews, and there were Brits, and there were dark agents of evil. And the good news is, however, is that Erdogan's there to save Turkey. So this is a common narrative, and it's really interesting how it goes back to the narrative that's painted these days of the Ottoman Empire's demise, which was again that Europe was jealous of the Ottoman Empire and it brought it down, and you did literally have sort of French and English troops trying to take Turkey. So this has some kind of traction, and it follows, and it seems to go through to the present day. So yeah, this narrative is very useful, comes in useful in particular when something goes wrong like the corruption scandal, and blame needs to be deflected, attention needs to be turned elsewhere. That was really used in the wake of the corruption scandal. So, one of the great examples of recent AKP propaganda, in my opinion, is a film brought to my attention by Defne, in fact, called Kodadı Koz. It's a film that opened in cinemas nationwide 2 weeks ago, and at first glance, if you look at the poster, it just looks like a Bond or Bourne spy thriller. You know, there are people in suits. There's kind of an Islamic-looking cleric in the background, and you think, who's he? There's Big Ben for some reason. There's a woman in a headscarf pointing a gun at Big Ben, and it all looks a bit weird. But yeah, so it's basically about Gülen, Fethullah Gülen, who's the Islamic cleric who lives in Pennsylvania, once an ally of Erdogan's, now very much not. So there was a very bitter falling out, which has incredibly complicated reasons, but suffice to say that the important narrative at the moment for the AKP to push is that Gülen and his followers in the police and the judiciary are trying to bring down Turkey, and they must be stopped, and they will be stopped. So also worth pointing out that tickets were given out free to this film after the first opening weekend, which I think, I mean, interesting in two ways. First, it was very unsuccessful. Presumably very few people went to see it, but also someone's willing to shoulder that financial burden. So here's the trailer, which might give you an idea.
Allah'ın izniyle Mehdi hocamız halifeliğini ilan edecek.
Yakın zamanda Tahsin Bey, 2007'de gazeteci Sarkis Bey, 2002'de gazeteci yazar Macit Bey. Bütün bu faili meçhullerdeki kilit isim aynı. Örgüt aynı.
Mehdi Efendi'nin Rusya'daki okullarında İngiliz ajanlar cirit atıyor.
Merhum Akif, Allah bu millete bir daha İstiklal Marşı yazdırmasın demiş.
So, again, a lot to talk about. I could tell you all the ins and outs of this film, which are quite extraordinary. But what's quite interesting is, I don't know if you noticed in the trailer that at one point, Erdogan is, the guy in the moustache is meant to be Erdogan. They give all these characters fictional names, but the actors playing them are obviously chosen to look for them. It's very obvious. But so, yeah, as he's looking out, there's the Turkish flag flying next to the Bosphorus, and that was just a very common image in the whole film. Whenever there was a scene of Erdogan, there seemed to be this enormous flag behind him, and quite often the camera would stop focusing on Erdogan's face and just pan into the flag, and it was just always together, Erdogan flag, and it's part of this. It's just, I think Erdogan has become Turkey almost in some people's minds. Like they're one and the same thing, and the continuation of Erdogan in his position of leadership is equal to the continuation of Turkey. In fact, that's how it's painted. It's as dire and sort of primal as that. The film's plot includes an assassination attempt of Erdogan by British agents. I don't know if you caught that in the Turkish İngiliz ajanlar. These British agents who plot in somewhere in the vicinity of Big Ben, we're asked to imagine. They plot his assassination, and in fact the end of the film, spoiler alert, is that Erdogan is praying in Süleymaniye Mosque, and there are British snipers everywhere, ready to kill him as he comes out, and he somehow survives, and it's all wonderful. But a week after the film was released, on all these pro-government papers released front-page stories on apparently an assassination attempt against Erdogan's daughter, Sümeyye. And it's just interesting to me that we have a narrative in the media, a narrative in a propaganda film disguised as a commercial film, and it's not really a case so much of life imitating art as political narrative shaping people's visions of reality. Now, I'm also going to show you an AKP campaign video, which, to all intents and purposes, has the exact same narrative as Koz. And again, look out for the music. and images of the flag and threats, dark threats.
Arkadaş, yurduma alçaklara uğratma sakın. Siper et gövdeni, dursun bu hayasızca akın. Doğacaktır sana vaat ettiği günler hakkın. Kim bilir, belki yarın, belki yarından da yakın. Ruhumun senden ilahi, şudur ancak emeli. Değmesin mabedimin göğsüne namahrem eli. Bu ezanlar ki şehadetleri dinin temeli, ebedi yurdumun üstünde benim inlemeli. Bastığın yerleri toprak diyerek geçme, tanı. Düşün altındaki binlerce kefensiz yatanı. Sen şehit oğlusun, incitme, yazıktır atanı. Verme dünyaları alsan da bu cennet vatanı. Kim bu cennet vatanın uğruna olmaz ki feda? Şüheda fışkıracak, toprağı sıksan şüheda. Canı, cananı, bütün varımı alsın da hüda. Etmesin tek vatanımdan beni dünyada cüda. Ben ezelden beridir hür yaşadım, hür yaşarım. Hangi çılgın bana zincir vuracakmış şaşarım. Kükremiş sel gibiyim, bendimi çiğner aşarım. Yırtarım dağları, enginlere sığmam taşarım. O zaman vecd ile bin secde eder varsa taşım. Her cerihamdan ilahi boşanıp kanlı yaşım. Fışkırır ruhi mücerret gibi yerden naşım. O zaman yükselerek arşa değer belki başım. Dalgalan sen de şafaklar gibi ey şanlı hilal. Olsun artık dökülen kanlarımın hepsi helal. Ebediyen sana yok, ırkıma yok iznihlal. Hakkıdır hür yaşamış bayrağımın hürriyet. Hakkıdır hakka tapan milletimin istiklal.
Yeah, in some ways this video leaves me speechless, but it's worth talking about. So just at the end there, yenilmez means sort of invincible, eğilmez, inflexible, sort of super strong. Basically, Turkey is going nowhere. So throughout that, I'm not actually sure whether that was Erdogan's voice or someone who sounded very much like Erdogan, but I think it probably was his voice, and I think it's deliberately designed to sound like the voice of a hoja, like in a mosque. It's got that same magnified quality, that same sort of sonorous tone and seriousness, and again, it has to be noted that Erdogan is a brilliant public speaker when he has his nose. Once he didn't, and he was literally silent for about a minute. But you know, when all's going well, he's an excellent speaker. He's got charisma. He's got presence. He's a no nonsense kind of guy, and Turks really respond to that. I think certainly his voter base responds to that. Now the film, I mean, you couldn't miss the sort of the mass movement towards saving that flag, and you know, to me they look like ants, but I think the image is meant to be of everyone pulling together, everyone being united. So what that says is that if you sort of speak badly of the government of Turkey, if you're one of these naysayers who thinks that Erdogan is not a good thing, then you're pretty much allied with the dark forces of evil, of like the agent at the beginning who cuts down the flag for no apparent reason. It's this real idea of you're with us or you're not with us, and I mean the music, as I mentioned, is kind of stirring stuff, even if you rationally disagree with the whole thing and find it stupid. It's well done. It's well produced. They've covered people from all walks of life. That's one of the things I find so impressive. There's a baker and a barber and people in school and religious people, a Kurd. In the field somewhere, like they really reach out. They make a point of reaching out to every single section of society to say, you have to be with us. This is what it's about. This is the future. This is Turkey, and this is the voice of our leader telling us we need to band together. So this, by the way, also to put it in chronological context, this advert was released also in the run-up to the March municipal elections in the wake of the corruption scandal. So again, along with the Salam Irade, the Iron Will poster, it was all part of this attempt to denounce the corruption allegations and put on a united front and say, no, we're not going to bow to the forces of evil. So we've covered Erdogan's public narrative in media, and I also want to talk a bit about his visual impact in the form of construction. Okay, I've got little time left. I just want to show you some images of the way the AKP is physically transforming Turkey with Ottoman construction. This is an artist's impression of, or a digitalized impression of Çamlıca Mosque, which Erdogan wants to build on Çamlıca Hill in Istanbul, the highest point. It will be apparently seen from anywhere in Istanbul. And it's that Selanik kind of style. This was what was going to be Gezi barracks. This was why the Gezi protest happened, is because Gezi Park was going to be demolished and these barracks were going to be constructed. They're a replica of the barracks that were in place in the early 20th century, and they were the seat of the forces that put down a Young Turk revolution. So symbolically very important in terms of Islam and secularism. This is a real-life photo of Aksaray, which is Erdogan's new palace, which cost an unbelievably mind-boggling amount of money, and has sort of more than 1,000 rooms. And I mean, I've talked to quite a few AKP supporters about their reactions to this palace, and none of them are bothered by the cost and the scale of it. They all seem to think of it as Erdogan's due, what he should have as the president of Turkey. This is the kind of palace he should have, and the fact that it was built from taxpayers' money in a time where it's not exactly, it's okay, but it's not rosy. I think it's interesting that that people don't mind. Also, it's reminiscent of Dolmabahce Palace, which was built in 1856 by Sultan Abdülmecid to sort of compete with the extravagances in European architecture and the new palaces in the Russian consulate, and it was felt that, you know, appearances needed to be kept up, and therefore Dolmabahce was built. And then finally, this is my second to last image. This is a photo which became notorious. It's President Erdogan and Abbas, the Palestinian leader, in the palace with an array of Ottoman warriors who turned out to be, in fact, actors from the State Theatre who were made to dress up. They had no choice because they were from the State Theatre, and they're rolled out whenever there's someone like Putin or Abbas or someone important. Okay, so the sad consequence of that was that a professor at Pamukkale University, I think, had to resign after he got death threats on Twitter for comparing one of the costumes to a bathrobe. Again, kind of ludicrous, but there we are. I was going to talk about many other things, but I'm running out of time. So just a last image here of a poster for a candidate for nomination for the AKP party in the upcoming general elections. He's wearing the sort of the Ottoman garb here. It means hep birlikte, all together for a new Turkey, basically. And just a point of reference, similarities between this guy here, Osman Yavuz, and Sultan Süleyman, here pictured in the very popular soap opera Muhteşem Yüzyıl, which is Magnificent Century. It's all about Süleyman the Magnificent and how wonderful he was. So it's really happening. I mean, they look like joke. Sometimes I can't tell whether they're jokes or, you know, I know they're not, but you almost do. I wants to see them as parodies, but they're not parodies. They're real things like those posters and the election campaigns. And, you know, we do have to laugh because otherwise it's very sad. But it's important to remember that the political direction Turkey is taking it could have serious consequences. And by artificially reviving a glamorized Ottoman past with the absolute authority that comes with that, the current government might be irrevocably damaging Turkey's chances of a democratic future. Thanks. Thank you.